this might be a conversation that is driving a reality for a lot of us, or maybe for some of us. This is about a defeating and a no integrity conversation about being poor, about money, and about abundance or no abundance. If this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, I want to check with you if this is helping perpetuate poverty itself. Because on one side, there is that perspective of maybe it's our lives are never going to be better. Maybe this is the best we can get. On the other side, there is that blame on why they're poor. Judgments are all around. How might we bring a third conversation that suspends judgment and opens the possibilities to allow more people to prosper?
We need to know first factual stuff.
So here's
No.
what I know about the Philippines. This was the statistics that really got me to consider a life outside of my corporate life, working for this American company. And the statistics that I saw was this: that there are five socioeconomic classes that we look at in terms of a particular society. So there was the socioeconomic class A, or in short SECA, B, C, D, and E. A, back then, you're considered in the A's if you are earning upwards of $2,000, about 100,000 pesos a month. You have your own car, and perhaps you own your own home, no? C is when you're earning around $200. So this was in 2005. And so below $200 a month is D, and probably like a dollar a day is at the E. Okay, so this is what struck me the most. A, B, and C is about 8%. 8% of the country is A, B, and C. And D and
Okay.
E is about 92%. Further splitting, I think A is around 1.2%, maybe even less. That's kind of the statistics that has stayed with me, and something that's really been creating my context of knowing that the more middle class, the more a country has middle class, the more it becomes wealthy, the more the economy sustains itself. And so, how do we help our brethren?
If we have A, B, C, and D being 8%, let's say 1% is the A, which is $2,000 and above. I mean, we're looking at really, there's no middle class. 92% live on less than $200 a month. And I remember looking at some figures like the E would be considered extreme poverty, right? If you're talking about $1.50 a day, that's less than 200 pesos a day. That would be a good percentage. The D&E would be a good percentage of the whole country. So if you look at that, then I think those are in the provinces like fishermen and people in agriculture and other agricultural workers. What you just described is what's above the surface. But underneath that, what are the structures that are already in place? What are the paradigms of thought, the mindset, and the way we view ourselves as people? So this reality is caused by something else that's underneath it. And I think your question is basically a good question to interact with and to look at what causes that besides the famine. I'm sure there's plenty. I'm sure there have been a lot of studies in this area by, ADB or World Bank or, the NGOs like Oxfam and things like that.
I saw something really interesting the other day. I was watching a video about a North Korean defector who was talking about what life was like in North Korea. Well, subsequently, she escaped to China and Mongolia and eventually ended up in the United States where she's now residing and where she's speaking. She's very young, she's 26 years old. And she was talking about how beneficial it was to the North Korean government to keep people hungry. And she was saying that when you keep your people hungry, they won't aspire for anything. They have no dreams other than the only concern in life is what their next meal is going to be. And she was talking about the impetus for her to cross over into China and to risk her life and her family's life was just so she could have a meal and
Mm.
nothing beyond that, because she had no idea of freedom. She had no idea of what was available outside of their own country. So that's one of the things that's bothered me. Well, at least in North Korea, you can see there really is, if you've watched those telenovela, you see the divide. But in actuality, there really are great majority of their people are really suffering unimaginable poverty. And I was thinking about relating that to our country where it feeds into, for example, our democratic institutions like our elections. One of the realities is your vote, for the most part, is bought in these areas where people are suffering from poverty because that's what they need right there and then. And this is the candidate who will provide it. And they can't see beyond that 5,000 pesos. It's very hard to convince people that you're bartering away the future, not just of your of the country, but in a micro sense, your family's future. It's going to be more
Yeah.
of the same, except that every election, you get a certain amount of money from whoever, and you're left the same way or even worse afterward. So that's one of the things that I'm curious about. Are we really perpetuating? Is our government really out there to assist or to alleviate the situation of our farmers, of our fishermen, of those people who are living on a pittance day to day?
I remember last election, and then I went home to the province, and my uncle showed me a pot, and that's where all the donations of the candidates are. Fiesta is May after election, so he saved that pot so he can show it to us, and then we're the one who's going to count how much they got as a couple from all the candidates. For the two of them, they got 18,000 plus.
Wow.
So the donation from the governor to the mayor to the vice mayor going down, it's all different. And then you'll see there's a coffee with the noodles from the Kagawads and all the downtown. But I agree with you. For them, it's fiesta. It's the only time all the appliances in the bayan, in the town proper, are swiped out. And then after the bigayan, all andoks, all the chicken swipe out. Like, it's like their own fiesta. And there's this mother who's counting his children because these are the voters. And she's counting how many per head she'll get from her children as voters.
Yeah.
So it's really, and it's like that
Everywhere,
election.
and every year. I used to be an election lawyer. I was assisting one of my friends, and he was running his campaign right after President Estrada was unseated. And he was running on a campaign of a new future because Filipinos then, their expectations once again were hopeful. And he refused to pay anyone. On the day of the election, he did not give a single centavo to anyone. And people were crying because they said, if you had only given 50 pesos, as against the ruling candidates, thousands of pesos, if you had only given us even just a little bit, then there was a bigger chance that you might have won. On the day of the election and right after, no soft drinks and no beer on the island. Everybody had bought it all up with the election money. And here's the thing that people don't get. Where did this money come from in the first place? This money that they so gallantly give away every election period. These are the people's money, Most of these politicians had squirreled away or whatever. If you're a rich politician who can afford to, I know a certain politician who put aside a certain amount of money to run, and he lost, but he had the resources to do that. Then once you give away this money, of course you got to recover it, and you cannot recover it on a salary of what, if you're the mayor, at 100,000 pesos a month.
Can I offer, Honey, a counter to that? Because it's very easy for us to blame the politicians. But if you think about it, there are probably less than a million politicians, people who get voted for. There's probably less than a million of them in 100 million population. So there's only 1% of them in the entire country. And for us to say it's the fault of the 1% is maybe not looking at the entire issue fairly. Is there some responsibility that ordinary citizens like us or private sector people like us could also look at in terms of not perpetuating the poverty that's happening?
I'm with you there. At the same time, I don't think Honey was actually just citing that it's only that they are the source of the poverty. But yeah, it is one factor. But we can't overlook the fact that there are factual things that causes all of this. First of all, we have 7,000 islands, over 7,000 islands in this country, right? Where all those 105 million people are spread out. It's very difficult to manage. Okay, so already the infrastructure kind of allows for weak governance. Even economy going back and forth to the different places, it's already a challenge, right? Somebody that's a farmer somewhere can't get his goods to the city in time because of not enough roads, not enough infrastructure, and therefore he may or they may lose many of their crops and they can't maximize it. Things like that. And also, I was just looking at World Bank assessment, and they also said, the fact that we are in a place where we're so vulnerable with natural disasters. It's almost like for the people that are already poor and don't have the resources, that are not living in homes that are well built. Every typhoon season, basically, they get wiped out, and it takes them like the whole season again to start all over. It's like a trap. When you're poor, when you're in that space, you already lack resources, or sometimes you don't have any resources at all. It's very limited. And because of that, it increases the likelihood of you being in poverty. The more you're in poverty, the more you lack resources. Therefore, you are in poverty. So it's like a vicious circle. You can't get your kids to school, so education is limited. You don't have financial capital. You can't start a business, even a small sari store. And if you're poor, definitely you don't have friends in high places. So yeah, you're relegated to be poor generationally. There's like some factual things that we have to take into account. And at the same time, there are probably things that are more ontological, like there's some conversation in place that if it can be altered, something can be altered with regards to, how do we get people's mindset out of that and into taking specific kind of action. It's kind of complex. And this is factual. If you look at a lot of poor people, they have huge families. They have a lot of kids. Why is that? Maybe because they lack education, they lack sex education, they don't have access to health services. Again, that's another self-reinforcing mechanism that's already in place. That kind of keeps the poor even poorer. I think the politician part is just an added thing. It's like, oh, wow, here's an opportunity to take advantage of this marginalized group of people for my own advantage. That's a small part of it, but there's a lot of other things. Mindset also plays a lot with that, because poor is a mindset. And then there's the how much money you have. That's the fact. As a matter of fact, Dave Chappelle on one of his stand-up things, and he said, poor is a mindset. Because I have never been poor. He said, I've been broke a lot, but I've never been poor. So I think when people raise this, I'm poor, there's a world that comes with it. And that world, when it's undistinguished, yeah, it does create the perpetuation of that way of being. That's also something to address, but we can't ignore the fact that there are other factual things that actually contribute to that. And that's what most of the reforms, and that's what all the NGOs are dealing with, are all those factual things. But in our case, we can look at it from another place, from an ontological place, and from who we are as Filipinos, how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to the whole thing, and see if there's a particular mindset in which we hold the context of being poor.
There is the notion that once there's a judgment of being poor, then there's a judgment of no integrity. Well, I'm going to take this money, I'm poor. Well, I'm going to break this law on the road, I'm poor. I mean, there may be something into that as well. I wanted to just check with everyone if you see that.
I think there's a correlation for sure. I mean, one thing that I just noticed, just even recently, just with the COVID thing, when they say everybody stay home, certain people can do that. The five of us can do that, right? Because we're at a certain level. We're not rich, but we're at a certain level where that's possible for us. But there are people who it's impossible for them to stay home because they have to go out on a daily basis just to make the money to eat, right? And because of that, their actions will be, quote unquote, out of integrity. As a matter of fact, it could even be considered illegal, but not because they want to, it's because they have to. So again, that's the whole thing. It perpetuates it. It's almost like the rules only apply if you have the ability to follow the rules. But sometimes you're so pressed against the wall, you can't.
It's like Jean Valjean, good man.
Yeah.
But out of desperation to feed someone else, it's very sad. Not to condone it, but it's a reflection of what people would do. If you look at shoplifters gallery in the small stores, the number one thing that's being shoplifted is infant milk. They got to do what they got to do. And they, our jails are full again, also That also contributes to the whole way our justice system has broken down. For minor offenses like that, they get thrown into jail. They have no money to bail themselves out. The community rules on letting them out on the community's recognizance aren't really being implemented. And here's one thing that I learned from my work with the justice sector. Once they're in jail for, let's say, a minor offense, like stealing a can of infant's milk, then they begin to learn other things from other inmates because of the density of our jail population. They don't really separate one from the other while your case is being tried. They learn stuff like, okay, I think it's better for you to become a drug mule. There's a lot more money in that, once you get out and then you learn these things, and then there's already a resentment towards the system. And what is the root of all of that? And how do we address that in an effective way, or in a way that at least moves us towards something beyond the status quo?
Yeah, and really, I'm looking at us as private citizens, right? Us as people who really care about this land. What can we do? I want to hear the opinion of the coach as well. Any thoughts they want to share?
Someone once told me that, the Philippines isn't really a poor country. We have a lot of resources. So we're not underdeveloped, we're overexploited.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at the history of countries like us, like for example, Nauru, which had a lot of resources, it always starts with the country has a lot of resources and the people don't have a lot of money. And then the second stage is, okay, some country comes in and starts getting your natural resources. And then just when your resources are depleting, some people begin to have a little bit of money. And then towards the last stage, there are no more resources in the country. And I don't know, maybe 1% or whatever percent, they have a lot of money. And then the rest, like the 90%, they have no more money and they have no more resources. So this has been the pattern with whatever third world country that got exploited in the past.
Just wanted to connect one other idea from what the coach said. We don't even have to look very far. South Korea up until the 80s. So they were only liberated from Japan. And they were, if you know their history, they were exploited. They were left in poverty. I mean, these guys were worse off than we were because we only had like 3 years of Japan and they had more than a century of it. Sometime in the 80s, so there was really the IMF crash, etc. And they did have a dictator. If you remember your Asian history, they had a dictator just like we did, except that one of the biggest differences, I think he really shut down the country. I mean, they closed ranks. And he built up industry rather than building edifices and etc. that we had. So that's one big difference. And look at where they are now. No, South Korea, they were even worse off than we were in the 80s. And we were not very well off in the 80s either. But from that point, and then, just a few decades later, look at where they are. They're a powerhouse. They're first world country at this point. So that's one of the things that, for me, if you look at comparatively also, and like what happened, and I don't know, Singapore used to be also like backwater place, right? They were shoved out of Malaysia. It was like a no man's land. And then look at where they are now. I don't know. Vietnam is way ahead of us. I don't want to compare, but it's human nature to compare. In my mind, again, that all comes back to government administration and how a powerful leader can either drive your country to success or to ruins.
So Singapore had Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah.
South Korea.
I forget his name. Probably a Lee or a Park. Or sorry. But yeah, they had those kinds of leaders. Iron-fisted men. And sometimes, it really takes an iron fist. As long as that fist is steering the ship in the right direction and not letting it sink.
Yeah, there's a term, benevolent dictatorship.
But what if you don't have that?
Right.
So what can we as people do about it? I think that's the big question. Because we can always say, well, if we had this, if we had that, if we had this. But the fact is we don't.
Right.
And the fact is we have what we have. And I think that's the place that we can powerfully work from, deal with the way things are and see what kind of impact we can create. Like I was saying earlier, the factual things are there. We can't deny that. But then there's a lot of things that we can do with regards to educating people, with regards to altering the mindset, altering consciousness. That's an area that we can really look at, because that is something that we can actually impact with the work that we do, with the conversations that we can create with people outside of here. There seems to be a mindset that when you're rich, like it's kind of evil to have money, and that kind of creates justification for people. What the hell are you doing?
The cat wants to get into the conversation.
All right.
Oh gosh, come on. Anyway.
I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry
the
about
money, the money as being equated to evil, no?
Yeah. I mean, especially in a country where you have a history of divide between the minority rich and the majority poor. Just from that experience of the collective, there's some idea that when you're rich, you're evil, and you have all this corporate. You always think of this corporate people and all these people who are oppressing people. And in a sense, as a collective, maybe whether we are doing it consciously or not, or I'm sure it is unconscious, we somehow that prevents us. It's a constraint for a lot of people to be open to look at, what do I need to get money, or what do I need to go beyond what I have, without making it wrong. Maybe, I don't know. This is just my take. That's just one thing that I notice when you talk to people, and when you talk about rich people, there's something negative that they would have to say, or the immediate thing is, oh, kurap yan kasi naka-ano siya, naka-Mercedes, naka-ano. It could be true, but if people have that mindset already, it kind of takes them away from really creating possibilities about abundance. I'm speaking from an ontological place. I think, going back to the conversation we had last week, that's kind of like the source of the crab mentality. When somebody's up there, we pull it down, because it's like, I don't want to be like that. Nobody should be like that. Nobody should be ahead. So we pull people down. And another thing, okay, people don't talk about money. Like families here don't talk about money. Don't talk about finances. It's almost like taboo. I remember talking to somebody, and they said that it's kind of rude to talk about money when it, like in dinners or among friends. We have this view about money that it's bad and wrong, it's evil, and maybe because the Catholic upbringing too kind of adds to that. I don't know. I'm just picking, right? Inquiring.
Pera lang yan. Like when someone owes you money and she didn't pay back, instead of holding that person to account, you just cut it and pera lang yan. Kikitain ko rin yan. Like I'll earn it back. When it's money, it's easy to set it aside. It's not quote-unquote important.
And because of that mindset, most likely, the consequence of that is that people are reliant on luck. Like, look at all these people buying lotto tickets and wetting.
Yeah. Which also perpetuates one of the stereotypes we talked about, which is bahala na si Batman. It's like, instead of being cause in the matter, instead of 100% responsible, it's almost like there's something magical will happen that it would resolve everything. Some divine intervention.
On the other hand, the bottom line is you got to provide for your family, for yourself, etc. And this is why we have so many Filipinos working abroad, taking on jobs that are way beneath their educational background, etc. This is why we have so many separated families. Their families, yes, true, are financially well off compared to the rest. However, the impact on the family, on the relationships, etc., is different. And I've heard many OFWs also complain about how they work so hard, and then their family here they just accept the money, spend money, buy the latest PlayStation or whatever, and let's just keep asking for money, and that really doesn't solve anything. I don't know what's going to be the future of this family. Poverty is the root of a lot of these things.
And Chef Justice, what you just said, I want to relate that back to what the monk said. So, for example, you have this OFW who's earning money for the family, and then the family just buys all sorts of things with it. You can't talk about it. Like, the OFW can't go and complain, hey, could you please save a little bit because I'm working so hard earning money for the family. You're not supposed to talk about that, because then you're being the ingrato. The person that, uy, pinag-aral kita, magtrabaho ngayon for the family. Oh, and I think one other thing that I remembered from what the monk said is, we have this quotation, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Aha!
Again, the
Right?
Bible misinterpreted.
Yes.
Ay,
I,
naku.
I hear that. Like it's sort of bad and wrong to be rich. And imagine that if you have that mindset, it closes a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
It just does.
It's a justification not to improve your lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, money. One of the things that I got out of my interpretation of the Bible, money is not the root of all evil because we all need money. That's the reality. We need
No.
money to live. We need money to make to send our kids to school, etc. We need money to make our economy grow. We need money. So money is
Money is a
in and of
resource.
itself.
It's simply a
Money as a
tool.
fact, yes.
Yes,
But
it's a
when the
tool.
love of money, the real biblical quotation, if I recall it correctly in interpretation, is the love of money is the root of all evil. Like when you become greedy and ganid and just steal and be corrupt and that's your whole world, then it becomes the root of all evil. But money in and of itself is like, yeah, that's true. It's a tool to help you get what you need and what you want in life. So I don't know. For me, that's a justification that's kind of sad. Well, if you're an ascetic and you live in the wilderness like John the Baptist, that's fine. But then again, that's a choice, not using it as a justification. I have another share. So I used to work with a lot of urban poor families and mothers and their children. I used to work also with the street children of Delta. I had many conversations with them because most of these kids they ran away from home. They had homes. They ran away from home and they were living on the streets because it was gave them a sense of freedom from the rules. And if you ask them at that point, do you have any dreams? But the great thing about the mission I was working with was, what's next for these kids? What's the future? You cannot die on the streets because I've seen it. I've seen generations in this country. We don't really have homeless people. Our homeless people are the ones who are not in the right minds, the taong grasa. Those people have really no homes. Or they had a home, then they ran away. Many of these people on the streets, who live on the streets in GPs, etc., actually have homes in the provinces, but they just choose not to. And I've been computing, I was telling my mom the other day, like, look at all these watch your car boys. And, they guide you to park. After a few minutes, you get out of the parking space and then you give them 5 pesos, 10 pesos, 20 pesos if they have an umbrella. And you add that all up, and they make a lot more than minimum wage per day. The people who collect bottles and newspapers in the past and other, disposable items that you can recycle and sell to junk shops. About 10 years ago, the daily earnings of each of those people was 500 pesos. Way above minimum wage, which at the time was 100 below 200. So it's more comfortable sometimes. It's weird, no? More comfortable.
Yes.
But then again, you'll meet somebody who actually wants, so one of these two of these street children that I met a long time ago are actually now on the road to becoming OFWs also because they're seamen. But it's a far cry from where they were when they were pushing those carts on the street. And then some of the urban mothers that I used to work with, we put up a catering service where we would employ them for minimum wage for half a day's work. Only three women came back because most of them would rather just play tongits at home, rely on their husbands, or just sit around because it wasn't comfortable for them to actually work. So there's very different factors in what I just said, and it's still an inquiry. Probably the mindset. It's easier to be poor. It is comfortable for some of them, or that's how they see themselves forever. And there are very rare people who will actually go and take an opportunity given to them to improve themselves and actually go do that.
I don't know. I think that goes with the mindset and the
Mm,
upbringing. Because our
mm,
ate at home, she's from Davao. She came to us
mm,
3 years ago with really a clear requirement to go to school. When she came to us, like she really wanted to go to school. Next year, she's going to graduate. She was just referred by someone and just really took the risk to come here to us And because my mom really stands for education, so she also made a promise that whoever it is that we got, we're really going to send her to school. And I just like, this funny, like this is one of my memorable stories. I was fixing top of the table, and then I saw this gold medal. And I was
Oh,
asking her, "What's this about?" Just found out that she's number one in her college.
wow.
Most outstanding student. She's number one.
Awesome.
She talks to her mom every day, but she's really clear she's going to finish school. Like
Mm.
no matter what it takes. So she don't know us, but when I met her, that she's very studious, she really studies well, and you can really just feel her conviction that I'm going to finish school because there's no opportunity in Davao for me. If I don't do this, I don't have access to it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a human being, when you are clear with what you want, it's possible. The environment, the universe, I don't know how to say it, but if you really want it, it can happen. So now the question with poverty is, are they even questioning, or are they even creating, or do they see it for themselves? Because for her, she's very clear she wants to finish school. And then when you ask her before, because before she tried it, it didn't work, and she learned from it. So when she found it out, she was so clear, I'm going to finish this. And because of what she's doing, two of her cousins who also came to Manila now went back and started doing their own school because they found out that she's almost done. So she's going to graduate next year. So, so yeah, I don't know. Is it in the mindset? If it's the circumstances, it's also another thing. Because as I was sharing, right, my mom, like, there's no access in the province, but she did what she can, and she was able to finish. So,
I think, well, Miss smart heart ka talaga eh. I see what she has that many people and some of the people that I share about have is a future.
yeah,
They're living into a future
yeah,
that their actions right now are all their actions and their ways of being right now are towards that future,
yes.
right?
You know what? That's so clear. Because if there's one thing clear about her, she knows she's going to take care of her mom.
Oh, there you
Like
go.
that's really her motivation. Like her really, when you ask her, she know her life is going to how to help her mom.
Yeah,
And that's as clear as like she's really looking forward to it. That's why she needs to finish school. She wants to have a good life because in the end she knows that you know she's going to provide and take care of her mom. She was sharing about because I have a very good relationship with her, right? So we're so used to straight talk, right? And she's the bunso in the family. When you say bunso, it's the youngest, right?
mhm.
And then she was talking to his brother the other day, and she sent money in the province, right? And then she found out that the money was not being used to where it's supposed to be used. And then yesterday she was sharing, ate, I told him straight, where did you use the money, right? You better tell it to me straight. Then don't tell me the truth and be a burden to you.
Yeah,
Because if you tell me, at least it's transparent, right? So that's what we did. And then she said to me, ate, I learned that from you. I learned that, you talk straight, you say it, because if not, it's going to be a burden to you. And then when the last time she spoke to her ate again, she was being asked to talk to the kuya because the kuya now listens to her.
yeah.
You're the only one she listens
Amazing.
to. And I told her, you know why? Why it happened? Because you went through the difficulty of talk straight. And then, you talk straight to your brother and that made a difference such that he now see you differently. So I was telling like, because we have this culture in the Philippines, right? And when you're ate, when you're kuya, we're not supposed to talk straight. We
Yeah.
just, yes ate, yes kuya. So changes in mindset per
Mm.
household.
I remember the story of who was this? Bo Sanchez.
Mm.
Supposedly, his housekeeper invests in the stock market, and the
Yeah.
amount of their savings is probably substantial. And my theory now, based on what I've heard from you, Smart Heart, is that how there's a saying that an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
all of these people who were born into poverty never got exposed to the ideas that you introduced them to, or to the
Yeah.
ideas that Bo Sanchez introduced them to. So there
Yeah.
is no conscious effort to introduce all of these things, or to paint a picture of a future worth living into, because all they see is, okay, what will I eat for the next meal?
I agree with you. So we also have an experience about also a help, and she steals. And I also talk to her. I also share with her. I also give her straight talk, like the same way of being of who I am. But she ended up stealing. I think what's different from this girl is really the future she created for herself. Like, the love for her mom. Because the other girl, like she just lost her husband. So she's a viuda, a widow. And she can't see any future anymore. Like she was well provided for, and then the husband accidentally died, and she can't see any future. Like now what I'm thinking, how do we contribute to poverty? How do we contribute that we elevate the relationship of money with Filipino people? Because that's also very important.
I think we kind of got something from our conversation. If I can share my insight from the initial question I asked, here's what I'm getting: that the language of abundance and the language of success is being able to see that for yourself, that you are
Future.
abundant and successful, and create that future for yourself, that you can have this resource called money, you can earn the money that you want, and that this is
Yes.
possible. But then there is this thing that stops us, right? There's this thing that tells us, oh, that's evil, oh, you're being greedy, or you're being your why, and really the job is to keep on focusing on this future that we've created and distinguishing all of these demotivating things and just getting them out. I have a story to share. One of our participants in our Thursday session chatted with me last Thursday before we ended the night that he just earned his target revenue for his
Wow.
business. And I was really happy, right? But then my brain started telling me, but why come you didn't do that? How come you're not able to do something similar to that one? I thought you're as great as this guy is. And so my brain kept on like telling me, oh, how, and then it reminded me the monk. It reminded me everything else that I failed on, and I had to remind myself, okay, this is not really something I'm committed to. This is just a story I'm inventing. And so, thank you for the thoughts. Move away. So, meditated and slept well. The morning after, when I got a really good sleep, I realized, why can't I be happy for my friend at that moment?
Right.
And I had to distinguish all of the stories that were demotivating me. In the morning when I woke up, I was like, yes, I'm so happy for him. Number one. Number two, now I can see that if it's possible for my friend, it's also possible
Yeah.
for me.
Yes.
So then it became now a pull for the future for abundance.
Very good. And it doesn't mean that because it happened to your friend, something got taken away from you. That's one of the things that weird ways that human beings, we live in an environment of scarcity.
And because as kids, right, you have a toy, someone takes
Yeah.
your toy, of course you lose one, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that mindset has stuck with a lot of us.
Yeah.
That that
Definitely.
that's our world. It's a scarce world.
Yeah.
Maybe not really.
That's a nice jump off point for future conversations.
Yeah, well, I think when somebody asks the question, how can we make that kind of difference? I think that's where we can make the difference. I mean, there's all the other factual stuff, the structural stuff that other people are working on, but we can alter the conversation, right? We can be the one that intervenes in that conversation,
Hmm.
just like what the coach was saying. We have to be the voice that intervenes in that conversation to really kind of kill that small mindset about money being bad and wrong, and it's been handed down generation after generation. We have society that keeps reinforcing it. It's going to take something to say, no, number one, it's possible. Two, you got to really deal with the impact that this limiting belief has had on your life, not only on your life but on society at large. And see, we this is I guess this is where we can create the intervention. You know.
I have a practice, the monk, about money that I
Mm.
still do until now. Whenever I would receive money, a change, anything that's cash, I'd always say to myself, "Thank you, you're my friend. I
Wow.
welcome you, you're my friend." Like, cause It's automatic. You don't take it for you take it for granted. Our relationship with money. But if it's downloaded generationally, then it's automatic. It's not us, right? It's already like innate to us about money. So how do you shift that? It's in the everyday practice again. So when you receive money, when you receive collection, you thank you, you're my friend, I welcome you. Like like until the wiring in the brain is thick enough such that we welcome money, and it works. I don't know, but I love money, and like I know that money an access for me to express my love for my family. It's an access to a life that that I love. So yeah, and
And
I also have that thing about religion. So yeah,
yeah,
money is
for,
my
for,
friend.
for me, just one last parting thing is to really get that money doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
right? Because that's one of the limiting things. Like we think when we have money, we're somehow special or better, and that when we don't have money, we're somehow less than, right? So
Right.
even if that dynamic alone, it just creates a mindset where we don't have a powerful relationship with money, right? Money is just money; it's
Um,
just a tool, and it does not mean what we make it mean. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's what you have, and what you have is what you have. And if you're committed to get more, it's possible. There's a lot of other avenues where you can learn to to gain money, right?
yeah.
So that's my thing. And as a group, we could create conversations like this where we can impact a lot of people that could make a difference with their relationship with money. Okay, I guess that's our kind of job, to intervene in that limiting belief about money, about poverty, about abundance,
Abundance. Yeah.
about rich. Yeah. Any last thing you wanna say, Tech Guru? We got a minute left.
Yeah, just wanted to add that as we suspend the judgment, hey, that if you're tagged as being poor, it's not that you are going to be poor for the rest of your life, but that maybe you've made that as an identity for a while, but it doesn't have to be the identity forever. And all it takes is to let it go if it doesn't work for us anymore, and
Mm.
to get a new future, to create a new future in our minds, and figure out, right, we'll figure out how to get there, but the most important thing is keep that future alive.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Critical.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
Okay. So it's time. It's 30. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube on a repeat, please say hello to us by leaving a comment, and don't forget to subscribe and like us. Okay. All right. Anything else, guys?
See you next Tuesday,
Yeah.
7:30
See you
p.m.
next
Manila
Tuesday,
time.
7:30 p.m. Third Conversation channel.
Every week, the five of us in this video talk about creating a new future for the Philippines. If you haven't done so yet, click on the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. We would love to have you on our journey as we try to create an entirely new Philippines.